NVIDIA GH200 72-core Grace CPU benched against AMD Threadripper 7000 series. GPShop.ai is building prototypes of their ultimate high-end desktop supercomputer, running the NVIDIA GH200 Grace CPU for AI and HPC workloads. Michael Larrable, founder and principal author of Threadripper, was first allowed to remote access a GPShop.ai GH200 576GB workstation converted model in early February, for the purpose of benchmarking it against systems based on AMD EPYC Zen 4 and Intel Xeon Emerald Rapids processors. Larrable noted, "It was a very interesting battle that demonstrated the capabilities of 72 ARM Neoverse V2 cores, in Grace. With this GPShop.ai GH200 system actually being in workstation form, I also ran some additional benchmarks looking at the CPU capabilities of the GH200 compared to AMD Ryzen Threadripper 7000 series workstations." Larrable had on-site access to two different Threadripper systems, a Hewlett-Packard, HP, Z6G5 a workstation and a System 76 Thellia major semi-custom build. No comparable Intel Xeon W hardware was within reach, so the Team Green desktop supercomputer was only pitched against AMD head processors. The HP review sample was configured with an AMD Ryzen Threadripper PRO7995WX 96-core, 192 threads and 4 processor, 8x16GB DDR5 5200 memory, and NVIDIA RTX A4000 GPU. Larrable said that it was an all-around nice high-end AMD workstation. The System 76 Thellia Major was spec'd with an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 7980X processor as the top-end non-PRO SKU. It is a 64-core, 128-thread part, working alongside 4x32GB DDR5 4800 memory and a Radeon PRO W7900 graphics card. Larrable noted that the three computer systems were, all freshly tested with Ubuntu 23.10 with a Linux 6.5 kernel, the Performance CPU Frequency Scaling Governor, GCC 13.2, and other defaults for this latest Ubuntu release. All the CPUs were running at stock speeds. The high Threadripper frequencies reported is a known AMD state bug AMD is working to fix. As with the prior GH200 benchmarking article of the 72 Neoverse V2 CPU cores with Grace, the current tests are just looking at the processor, system performance. I'm waiting on remote access again to the GH200 for running the GPU accelerated portion of the tests, so this article is intended at looking at how the Grace CPU compares to the AMD Ryzen Threadripper 7980X and PRO 7995WX x86_64 Linux workstations for various workloads. As noted in the prior article, no CPU power consumption numbers unfortunately due to no RAPL, power cap driver or similar exposure of just the CPU power consumption data currently under Linux for the GH200. Threadripper's conclusion did not include any overall performance metrics for the competing processors, workstations, in 39 benchmarks according to further analysis conducted by Tom's Hardware. The GH200 Grace CPU beat the Threadripper 7980X in 17 tests and the 7995WX in 15. The NVIDIA processor is more of an efficiency-oriented server product, while the AMD Threadrippers are purpose-built for top desktop performance, as advertised. The Threadripper chief author signed off with, "Those wanting to go through dozens more benchmarks of these three Linux workstations can find all of my raw data via the sub-result page." So while there was a lot of NVIDIA GH200 versus AMD EPYC versus Intel Xeon benchmarks looking at the CPU performance earlier this month, those weighing the NVIDIA GH200 use for Linux workstation users will hopefully find today's performance results against AMD Ryzen Threadripper useful. For HPC workloads that are Arch64 tuned and can leverage the available system memory effectively, the GH200 could deliver great performance against these Zen 4 Threadripper workstations. but for software extensively tuned for x86-64 and or not as heavily dependent upon system memory bandwidth, the Threadripper 7980X and Threadripper Pro 7995WX are excellent workstation options.